Hello everybody, this is the Plastic Commando coming to you today from deep behind enemy lines. Today's video is it's a continuation series on custom tanks for Axis Allies WW1 1914. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about the mighty Tsar tanks, or lack thereof. Of course, what you see on the video before us is the British Mark V tanks. And in terms of Axis and Allies gameplay, they're in service for Tsar Nicholas II. Because I'm not even sure if Russia even had a tank on loan from the British Empire or anybody else, truthfully. Russia was typically known for three things on the battlefield, and that was men, and even more men. What I'll be utilizing as the out-of-box pieces for Russia are the tanks that came in the game itself, and of course we've painted and modified those a bit to reflect the colors of the Russian army, and we'll touch on those just in a second. But you know, in my research for looking at tanks, custom tanks for Russia, I'll have to be honest. I mean, I had never even heard of the Tsar tank, truthfully, until looking up some information. And this of course is just a picture on Wikipedia. But obviously you're not going to find this particular tank in history books, because it simply was an experimental tank. And there was one prototype built in 1914. But just to kind of give you an idea, if the picture shows well, you can gauge the size of this tank. It's hard to tell with black and white, but those are actually men standing on the top of the tank near where the turret is and the gun ports. It's kind of hard to make out, but I think you can possibly see a few men standing there. So, you know, by all standards, it was a massive machine. I won't call it a tank, but it was a massive machine in and of itself. But the Tsar tank was actually, I mean, it was a project that was designed to try to be a tank. It never had, it never used any of the typical Caterpillar tracks that most tanks would use. In fact, it was just the design was more of a spoked wheel. Obviously you can gauge from the picture, but I mean, it is just a very bizarre contraption, the Tsar tank was. The project was scrapped after some initial tests were done, and the project itself was deemed to be just simply a failure of engineering, and the vehicle itself was found that it would be vulnerable to artillery fire. So I guess in the words of my son, duh. I mean, when you look at it, it's basically just a giant carnival tricycle. I mean, it's straight up H.G. Wells from War of the Worlds, in my opinion. It's it's one of the weirdest machines I've ever seen that you know, tried to make a place in World War I. So just to kind of show you this thing again, I mean, it is it's straight from a sci-fi concept, in my opinion. But you know, kudos to the designers of this project. I mean, trying to make something that could potentially be used in battlefield. But it was it was just a bizarre tank in and of itself. But just a few things though about the concept of the tank. I mean, well, I mean, actually they did. It got beyond the concept. There was one prototype, but it was about 60 tons in weight, and it stood about I think it was about almost 60 feet in height, and so it was you know, it was a huge monster that was a monstrosity, I guess I would say. But it never obviously saw any engagements in battle. Its purpose was to have machine gun turrets and possibly some guns. But like I said earlier, in I guess in trials, it was found that it really had a problem getting bogged down in soft earth, and did not have the right power to pull itself out of uneven ground, trench works, and so it was basically scrapped. But one interesting note that I had found in just doing a little bit of brief research on the Tsar Tank is it actually remained in the same place that it broke down in near Moscow up until 1923, when it was finally just taken apart for scrap. So I think that's kind of hilarious myself. But in any event, it's a very bizarre tank. I just wanted to share that with you. But obviously in the Axis Allies game itself, we're going to be utilizing tanks based on of course, the out-of-box version of the British Mark V tanks. And just to bring a few up here to the camera, you'll see these are, I've had these painted in my typical brown leather from Army Painter, which I've used to transition the color for all of my armies. Excuse me, all of my army, that is, for the Russian Empire in this game. And they've been certainly weathered and sealed with Army Painter matte varnish. And the decal on the side of the tank, it's from My 94 Enterprises. And of course, you'll notice a difference between the yellow emblem on the game board itself and the red, white, and blue roundel that I have placed on the tank. The roundel was actually used as part of the Imperial Russian Air Service. It was, of course, red, white, and blue, based on the Russian Empire tricolor flag. And the yellow flag itself was an imperial design for Tsar Nicholas II. And of course, this all ended abruptly in 1917 when the communists took over. But nevertheless, even prior to the communists taking power, this particular tricolor roundel, since it was based on the Imperial Russian Empire, was used on aircraft and airplanes during World War I. But in this case, for game purpose identification, we're going to be utilizing this roundel for signifying, obviously, Russian service. And just lastly, again, there's nothing fancy. Again, these are just out-of-box tanks, which I'll be using. But I customized them just a little bit to make them different and presentable, obviously, for gameplay. And that's really it. Just a quick video on my custom tanks for Russia. And we'll be putting out a few other videos to finish up the powers in the game. And we'll have another video up as soon as we can. Hope you guys have a great day. This is the Plastic Commando. Over and out.